Hello there, welcome back to another episode of Cloud with Chris. You're with me, Chris Reddington, and here we talk about all things cloud. Now, thank you folks for joining. This is the second live session of the week. We're going very busy with the live sessions this week, which is always fun, keeps us on our toes, but it's going to be an eventful one tonight. I've got a great guest on the show, Sarah Lean, Techie Lass, some of you may know her as, and we'll be talking about a couple of topics here today. We will be talking all about hybrid cloud, and we'll be talking about cloud advocacy, DevRel, and Sarah's own journey into that, and getting some of her perspectives as well in that space. So you know what to do. If you like the content, please hit like, please hit subscribe if you want to find out all about the new content that's coming up, and of course the notification bell so you know as soon as there is something that you want to go and watch. And of course, we're not just YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and cloudwithchris.com, where you can listen to the recordings back and listen, or rather read, a transcript in real time as well. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and bring in Sarah onto the show. Hey there, Sarah. Good evening.
Hello. That was all very seamless. I love this. I think this is the first time I have done a live stream with Teams and OBS in all of the 18 months that we've been virtual, Chris.
Yes. Achievement unlocked. I'm unique. I'm special. And you say that was seamless. We're not talking about the panic of like 6 p.m. being like, oh, we should stop talking, we should go live, and then it didn't go live. So we'll I'll take it, but I think I should let everyone know it wasn't quite that seamless. So I think we've set the tone and the scene about how this evening's going to go, right? And we're going to have a bit of fun here. So there may be some folks who somehow have been hidden under a rock, don't know who you are. Shall we start with some introductions first, Sarah?
Yes, this is the bit I always stumble at because I don't know how to introduce myself. So yeah, I am Techie Lass on Twitter and social media and stuff like that. My day job is a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft. And I think I introduce this job differently every time someone asks me what it is. But ultimately what it is around community engagement and helping people be aware of Microsoft products. I do not do marketing. I am a technical person. I'm not a marketing person, but it's about awareness of how to use those products and how to make them work and actually be valuable within your environment. And that can be helping to write documentation officially on like docs.microsoft, or it could be writing blogs about the fun stuff about how I've made something work in my own home lab, and then it can inspire you to do some things. And as a cloud advocate at Microsoft, I'm also inside the Azure engineering team. So that means that I work quite closely with a lot of the engineering product teams to give feedback back from yourselves and take that to the product team and then bring it back out to the community as well. I think this week, as an example, I've been working with a team behind the scenes around the Windows Package Manager and trying to feedback on that. I've been working through some of them their documentation myself, finding some holes in it, finding some broken stuff within their GitHub repos and pushing that back and making it better for people, just as that fresh set of eyes, because I'm sure you all are aware, if you write something yourself, if you work on something for a long time, it's really hard to be objective about whether this makes sense or whether it's broken and stuff like that. So I can add those extra set of eyes for that kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of me, Chris.
Excellent. That was seamless. You say, that's the part you find hard. That was as if it was like pitch perfect there. So no, all good, all good. So then I guess focusing in on that a bit, we'll come to the developer advocate side of things a bit later. We'll first maybe focus on the tech for the first half or so. Well, as long as we continue talking, we feel we move on, I guess. So Azure Arc, I guess, is one of the areas that you focus on, Azure Stack and overall hybrid cloud. Maybe let's start there and just give a quick recap in terms of what it is. I think we've had some sessions on the show previously around it. So, what is it for anyone who's listening in here that maybe hasn't heard of it again, just as a very high level view?
So at a very high level view and a very simplified view of what Azure Arc is, it really allows you to extend some of the capabilities you might love on Azure down into your own environment on-prem, wherever that may be, or even use Azure services on another cloud provider. Azure Arc allows you to extend those kind of management tools, things like Azure Policy, which you can use to implement governance. It can help you with backup, it can help you with even just tagging things and helping you pull an inventory of your hybrid environment into one place and be that kind of management center place. I think that's probably a very, very, very high level view of Azure Arc.
Absolutely. And I think where Azure Arc originally started was, very much an infrastructure-focused service. I think it started for virtual machines. Then the data platform pieces came along as well, Kubernetes alongside that. And I think in build as well over recent weeks, we've even gone as far as having application services on top of that. So I can maybe talk a bit about that as we go through. But it's really exciting. It's really becoming this end-to-end platform of, hey, Microsoft have done all this great engineering work in this thing called Azure. Let's go and bring some of that brilliant goodness and those great things back to on-premises.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, and a lot of customers are focusing on how do we make the best of the both worlds? How do we leverage the cloud services, but how do we also leverage all of that investment and time and energy we put into our own data centers on-prem? And then when they do that, they start to realize that management overhead is a bit of a pain, even just the simple things, like I said, trying to search for all your servers that have, Microsoft Edge installed, maybe not wanting to install Edge on your servers. But, from a management point of view, how do you do that? Is that like a PowerShell script? You have to pull everything together and you have to make, or do you have to go and buy another third-party tool? If you install the Arc agent on your on-prem servers, you can actually use what's called change management or change inventory, I think it's called, within the Azure automation blade. And that can do all that for you. It can pull all that information for you. So even just simple things like that, Azure Arc really helps you be more efficient in your organization from a very basic level, but it obviously has all the extra fun stuff that you just talked about as well.
Absolutely. And you made me think there, actually. You mentioned Edge as an example, but there are really tangible scenarios where you'd want to use that inventory tracking for different technologies, like Internet Explorer. I think they mentioned now is going to be going out of support at some point. It's been a while. I guess everyone's known the day is coming. So to try and discover things like that, for example, where you need to go, right, what is the scale of the impact of that for us across our estate, not just on premises, not just in Azure, but even in AWS, in Google Cloud, in other clouds and other platforms, being able to get that unified view across all of those. Like you say, that sometimes we may have had a suite of tools, or we're using one tool over here, one tool over here. Now that Azure becomes that management plane, it becomes quite I wouldn't say easy. There's still obviously going to be challenges with it in the real world, but it becomes a much more manageable problem, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think this allows people to be able to take that thing that they enjoy about Azure, so like whether it be the inventory tracking, and extend it across their entire environment, instead of having one tool for their on-prem environment and then one tool for their cloud, and then having to do two queries and then join them together, so you can use those things that you love within Azure, and pick and choose, right? You can onboard bits and pieces within Azure. It doesn't even need to be a hybrid environment. You could be saying all of our workloads are going to be in the cloud right now, but we actually want to use tiny bits of Azure. We want to use that inventory tracking, but we're not ready to go full cloud. You can do that. You can do that. That could be the first step into cloud usage for you. So it's a gateway drug into cloud, or it's something that can make your life better if you're already bought into that hybrid scenario already.
Awesome. And I think, as we're talking here, actually, the one word that keeps cropping up in my mind as I think about all the different scenarios with Arc is consistency. You've got consistency in your inventory tracking, you've got consistency in applying things like policies, and we're allowed these types of policies to be applied across our estate. But even with some of the announcements I mentioned about a couple of weeks ago from Build, sure, management and making that easier is great, absolutely. And I think it's a large part from an operational perspective, from a production estate, that taking that overhead is definitely going to be making a lot of people cheer. But when you think about from maybe a developer perspective, and we've had these discussions before, right? I'm the dev side of the house. This is me waving my banner at this point. But from a dev perspective, yeah, we've had Kubernetes around for a while and containers, and yes, we can go and run containers anywhere. We get that, fine, cool. We can do Kubernetes clusters, great. But I think the announcements last week, if people didn't quite catch them, are actually really, really significant, because even with a container perspective, I have to kind of ship that container. I have to do something with that container. I have to go and make that a thing that I do something with. And sometimes developers don't really want to get into the managing of the underlying platforms. We just want to keep building stuff. We like building stuff and being innovative, right? And doing all of that development work. And I think this is the beauty of some of those announcements from last week. So a few things. Azure App Service, Azure Event Grid, API management, and then because of app services, you've got functions and logic apps as well. All of those can now be deployed into an Azure Arc enabled cluster. For anyone that's interested, I'm not really going to go in depth on it in this show, but I've got a series of blog posts you could go and read about that. But I think it changes the game from that perspective, back to that word consistency, because now I can go and deploy, as long as there is an Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes cluster, bit of a mouthful, but there we go. If it's on AWS, if it's on GCP, if it's on premises, or even if it's an AKS cluster in Azure, I can deploy an app service Kubernetes environment and deploy my app service to any one of those environments. And I still get all the same benefits that I got before in terms of easy authentication and authorization through the capabilities of app service. And scalability is really easy because it's just a slider in the Azure portal, and everything is quite literally just like an Azure resource in the Azure portal. And it is just magical. I think when things like that fall into place, it's that consistency word just makes me feel all nice and warm. So that's me geeking out for a bit.
I know, because I was just at a virtual conference there this afternoon, Chris, and during the roundtable Q&A, someone asked us, what do we see the biggest growth area? What's the product that's going to be the 5-year kind of thing that's still going to be here? And we all actually answered governance and security, looking after our environments, maintaining that consistency, and just having a good overview of what's happening in our environment, and viewing that. And I think that comes back where Azure Arc can really play into that, keeping everything, like you said, consistent and manageable. Because how many times have we heard about data breaches because someone accidentally forgot to tick the no public endpoints by mistake? And we're all human. We've all done that. We've all left something open that we shouldn't have done, or we've all left something with an unsecure password. Azure Arc and a whole bunch of other features behind that can help you manage that and make sure that you, as an individual, are adhering to your company's kind of consistency and your policies and your governance and your security without necessarily having to know all of that. It'll just, your brand new server or whatever you install, put Azure Arc on it. It will then collect all of the configuration from your already environment, assuming someone else has set it all up. And you don't need to know what ports you need to open, because that'll all come down to you, and it'll all be secure, and it'll all be there and that consistent. And you can go home and you can sleep easily knowing that you have done your job. Right.
Absolutely. And I think this is the thing as well, right, is Azure Arc isn't necessarily reinventing the wheel with things either. It's really just amplifying and enhancing some of the functionality and features that are already there in Azure, like you mentioned, Azure Policy. I was chatting earlier with some folks, and we were talking about, long story short, they are moving into kind of a new DevOps kind of world. They're doing infrastructure as code, all these things. And they were talking about, we could go and make sure that people, for example, aren't opening ports by doing pull requests and reviewing the code changes before they go to production. And I was like, I mean, you could do that. It kind of helps. But what if I'm having a bad day and I'm reviewing that pull request and I don't spot that change, and then it's gone into production anyway? It's not really a foolproof plan. But again, something like Azure Policy, which feels like it's been around forever, but is still, I think, one of those services that sometimes you mention to people and they're like, oh, cool, that sounds really interesting, and can just give so much value. Applying that again to all of your Azure infrastructure, to all of those Azure Arc enabled resources, brings so much value.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this is us just talking about the basics almost of what Azure Arc can
Hmm.
help you do. Like you said, there's the cool things that we announced at Build about bringing Azure PaaS services to your on-prem environment,
Mm.
which just like blows my mind to think that that's what you can do.
Yep.
Like I haven't even had a chance to play with it, but that's kind of next level what Azure Arc will be able to help us do, and where the team are obviously taking it with what they're thinking about. So yeah, the future's bright, absolutely.
Absolutely. Excellent. So yeah, I guess Azure Arc is one side of the picture, and then we've got Azure Stack as well. And I think there were a few announcements around Azure Stack, like AKS, for example, is now available on Stack HCI.
Mhm.
I can't remember if there are any other notable announcements, but do you find
Yeah.
that you're getting involved in a lot of Azure Stack discussions as well? Are you mainly focusing on Arc? How are you kind of seeing that split?
I've not talked a massive deal about Azure Stack. So this is where I think I get confused, and I think some of the audience get confused as well around what we actually mean by Azure Stack, because it
Mm,
used to be a product in itself. Azure Stack was a product. It was a bit of hardware that you deployed somewhere.
yeah.
Now it's the suite. Now it's the top level of your product. So you've got things like Azure Stack Edge, you've got Azure Stack HCI. I think there's Azure Stack Hub. I think there's a fourth
Yep.
one that I've forgotten.
Uh,
Can't remember my
there's
slide now. Um,
there's the one which is
but
like
yeah,
the data box. Does that count
yes,
under it?
Data Box
Yes, there
Edge.
we go.
Is that what that
I think
fourth one
so.
is? I think there's four.
We'll just
But
say it
yeah.
is.
I tend to, if I'm having that hybrid conversation, actually talk more about the HCI
Mm,
offering and where that's placed, because that fits quite well into the story of replacing servers potentially on your on-prem environment, but also hooking in with Windows Admin Center and Azure Arc, because both of those tools are natively enabled and are ready there for you when you spin up Azure Stack HCI.
okay.
So if you've already got that conversation, I often start off my hybrid conversations, Chris, with the story around how Windows Admin Center can help you manage your servers better, but
Mm,
also start to deploy some Azure services and manage those Azure services. And then when you start to use that and you've got into that cadence of using it, when you actually look at Azure Stack HCI, not only is it built around Windows Server technology, which you should all be familiar with if you're a Microsoft shop, but it's also got Windows Admin Center built in, and that's how you control your Azure Stack HCI kind of cluster as well. So suddenly it doesn't become scary. You might be tagging on Azure Stack and Azure Stack HCI onto it, and you're like, oh, that's scary. But when you break it down, it's actually Windows Server and Windows Admin Center. And then when you start to say Azure Arcs in the story as well, and you're like, oh, we're already using that. And suddenly it becomes such an easy conversation to almost adopt.
mm,
The financial people are cringing because of the amount of money that you might have to spend on your Azure Stack HCI. But it's there already. That story's complete. It's just another part of that complete hybrid story, and making you consistent, making it easy for you to adopt these new features and functionalities and bring them into your environment for me.
gotcha. And you mentioned a piece in there, the Windows Admin Center, and that's something I still haven't had a chance to play with, but I did put on my list last night. I want to try and deploy my own kind of Stack HCI instance and just have a bit of a play around at some point. That list is growing, so some point, I'm sure. But the Admin Center is actually really, really cool as well, because it's not just about managing. I think when we think about kind of the Windows Server Manager, thinking of the traditional piece of software that's installed with your Windows Server, it's very much about managing either this server or other local servers or a suite of servers. Whereas the Admin Center is beyond that, because you can even set up things like stretch networks that go up into Azure. You can go and do things like setting up your backups and how you want to go and replicate your servers. So again, that hybrid story is really ingrained and really entrenched in that in the Admin Center as well, right?
Yep, absolutely. Like, I don't like this phrase, Chris, but I find myself using it quite a bit. But Windows Admin Center can be your single management plane. It can be that single pane of glass that you use. So if you're doing some tasks in your Windows server, you're having to check event logs, you're having to check the certificates and stuff like that. And then another task on your to-do list is to enable Azure Backup for that server. You don't even have to leave the Windows Admin Center to actually configure that and to set that up. You don't have to go and open another browser window and go portal.azure.com or find your IAC script or whatever. You
Mm,
can just do it within Windows Admin Center. So again, it's great for people who maybe don't have the knowledge of how to do this, or maybe don't have the skills of being able to do infrastructure as code and stuff like that. It's a very simple wizard, and again, because it's kind of built around that whole Windows Server technology and the Microsoft layout of products, it's super easy to actually use it and onboard in it. I'm really excited to see where the team are going, because I think we announced, I don't know if it was build, it was just before build, we actually got Windows Admin Center inside the Azure portal. So when
Yes.
you go into an Azure virtual machine, down the left-hand side, you'll see the blade and it will say Windows Admin Center. You click on it, there's some magic you have to install and open some ports to make it. I think you install and Ultimate installs an extension onto your Azure virtual machine, but then you can use Windows Admin Center, so you don't have to go, oh, I need to fire up an RDP console, or I need to go and fire up my Azure Bastion and I need to go and look at it. You can actually use Windows Admin Center to actually do that from within the Azure portal. So it's very cool. And again, it's just nice to see that story being complete and being part of that hybrid story and making everyone just life better and life easier as well. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Seeing all of these, what appeared to be at the very beginning, disparate pieces now starting to come together into this cohesive story. No, it's good. And just so you know, for future reference, I am going to keep tabs on the single pane of management. I'm going to be, if we get any talks together, I'm going to definitely be setting you up with that line at some point. So that one's noted. Don't you worry. So let's move on. I guess we've been talking for a while here about the hybrid cloud piece, and I know that was kind of one half of the session we were going to talk about here. I think the other half, which maybe people will be interested in, is your journey. I guess your journey into becoming a cloud advocate, and I guess your thoughts on it, and some of your tips and your tricks. So maybe let's start at the very beginning, as they say, a very good place to start. I do like my musicals.
Yeah.
Had to get that in. How did that start? You know, where did you first get the idea that I want to do this as my full-time job? And let's start there.
I don't think I ever intentionally set out with being a cloud advocate, to be honest. I think like most people in most roles, you find you don't necessarily go into it intentionally. I started the Glasgow Azure user group, in 2017, I think it was. And I was like, I'm an introvert, Chris. I'm not an extrovert. I don't enjoy any of this kind of public speaking thing, and it doesn't come naturally to me. But in 2017, I wanted to learn Azure, and there was nothing in Glasgow. The nearest user group was London. That's not commutable anytime. So I started this user group, and before I knew it, I was standing up in front of people, telling them where the fire exits were, telling them where the pizza was being served, and introducing speakers and things like that. And as my journey grew, I started to learn more Azure things, and people were like, you're blogging about this, so why can't you go and stand up in front and do a presentation? And I was like, okay. And I think my very first presentation was around M365 and whether you needed a backup solution or whether you didn't need a backup solution. And I did that, and it was scary. It was nerve-wracking, but it was really fun at the same time. And I had a really great audience and support team behind me doing all of that. And it kind of grew from there. I found myself volunteering more for presentations. I found myself doing much more blogging and things like that, and starting to get much more involved in the community and much more involved on Twitter and the communities there. And before I knew it, I was kind of getting noticed by lots of people. I was getting more Twitter followers, all that kind of thing. And then I started to see this team called Cloud Advocates that my boss, Rick Claus, was starting up. And I was like, what is this? And then I found out a bit more about it. And before I knew it, Rick was kind of recruiting me into his team. So yeah, it was just wasn't intentional. Like if you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would have said, I'm a techie. I'm going to stay as a techie. I'm not going to move away from actually being a hands-on techie. And now I'm a techie that talks about tech.
And I think that's the thing, though, isn't it, with careers? Often we all have the best laid plans and the grand ideas that we're going to go down a certain path, but then suddenly something comes up and we go 180 or 360 or however direction you go, and we do something different. And a lot of what you said there resonates. I'm really only on the beginning of my journey, but I started Cloud with Chris probably 15 months ago or so now. And that has been a really fun one. It started off with the podcasting, then went to the vlogging, then I brought some of my old blogs along and got the blogging platform onto it. And I think, like you say, there's a point where you suddenly see that you start getting followers and you start seeing people say, "Oh, I like the content, that's good." And there's just things that seem to start happening. And like you, I can't quite explain why. I don't feel like I'm doing anything special, particularly. I feel like I'm just kind of learning out in the open and showing what I'm learning and writing it for other people. But it's fun, right? And I think this is one of the great things that you'll probably see, and maybe we can talk about it, as this community that we're a part of, this really supportive, thriving community. And I think for anyone who's listening in and hasn't really engaged maybe as much in the community and done a talk, for example, at a meetup group, or written a blog post, or done something in that space, honestly, I certainly feel this. You get a lot of energy by doing that stuff. How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, it's definitely a fun kind of circle of you learn something, you share something, people ask you questions, you go off and research and find out the answer for them, and then or they teach you how to do something, which is often the case sometimes. And it's just it's a nice way of learning and interacting and networking with people. So yeah, it's definitely been a fun journey. I don't think I've met anybody that's necessarily malicious. There's always the odd person that's one that bring you down and stuff like that, but overall everybody you sit in front of at a conference talk, everybody that's on Twitter and stuff like that, they're all really positive, and they are grateful for you giving your time up, and also grateful that you're sharing the knowledge and just helping them learn as well.
Absolutely. And I think this is a good point to plug as well, that we did a live stream last week. Wow, that's been a quick week. We did a live stream last week where we actually talked about whether to go ahead and present something live in terms of like demos, etc., or whether to have demos pre-recorded and almost demonstrate them and talk to what you would talk about live. And it was a really interesting discussion. I really enjoyed it. And it was interesting, the conversation we had, because I think the point we all landed eventually on was it doesn't really matter whether you go live or whether you go recorded content. It's all about the story you're trying to tell. It's all about you as a presenter and you getting your points across in terms of the content and the story you're trying to tell, really. So I guess with that kind of, maybe as a bit of context, what do you think are maybe some of the things that have helped you along your journey into being a cloud advocate? And not just that space, but everything you do in the community, right? In terms of that journey you've been on, what are maybe those things that you've learned along the way and you think, I wish I knew that from the beginning. I wish, we all get battle scars along the way, right? What are maybe some of those things that you encountered along the way, let's say?
That's a tricky one because I've never actually sat down and looked at it, Chris. I think to be brutally honest, I think I went into the cloud advocacy or the developer relations or DevRel, as you want to call it, space quite naively about what the job was and what it entailed. I thought it was just a fun job to do, sharing technology, learning about technology, doing presentations, creating videos. And I didn't realise all the intricacies that necessarily went along with that. You have to learn different skills, and very much the same as what I did with the user group. When I created the user group, I had no experience of running a user group. I had no experience about how to create a logo or how to market it, my group, as it were. And to a certain degree, I have to do the same things with cloud advocacy, because yes, it's great that I share content, but how do I get that out to the audience? So I've had to learn how to use social media. I've had to learn how to create interesting and exciting thumbnails to make my thing pop out to people. I've the same with Twitter and stuff like that as well. And how do you engage in Instagram? And I think lots of people are going down the TikTok route. I'm not going down the TikTok route. Not going there. But those are the things that you don't necessarily think about, because you think about, right, I know my technology, I know how to blog, I know maybe how to create a video and stuff like that, but then there's all that little bit that goes round cloud advocacy, because you need to get engaged with the audience and just figure all of that out. I think it's been an interesting journey on the last 18 months that I've been a cloud advocate. I think it'll be nearly 2 years that I've been a cloud advocate. So yeah, and it's now I'm starting to actually give back to that community, and figure out how I can help other people become a cloud advocate, become better cloud advocates. How do I become a better cloud advocate? Because there's the IT community that I'm involved in, but there's also the DevRel community that there is, and people in the same space as me, and I'm looking to give back into that space now as well, because
Awesome.
I've not got enough work to do, Chris, so why not?
Absolutely.
I think that's a long-winded answer to your question. Does that answer your question?
No, it's a great question, and I think there's, again, so much that resonates there. Like, a journey that I've been on recently a bit with the Cloud with Chris stuff is not quite SEO and search engine optimization for anyone calling me out on acronyms here. But partly SEO, partly that whole kind of tracking and understanding where your users are coming from. Until maybe 4 to 6 weeks ago, I didn't really have any clue. I had Google Analytics on my site and the normal provisos about, hey, if you accept this, this is why you're accepting this, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't really use it intelligently. I didn't really try to understand. I mean, I tried to understand, but I didn't get much from it in terms of why people are coming to my site, where they're coming from, all these things. What I've started using is things like the UTM tracking links with some short links and all these things, to start making it a bit easier for me to know, okay, I'm getting a load of people when I post on Reddit. They're actually receiving that content. They're actually really engaging with that, as opposed to when I post in this format on LinkedIn or Twitter, they're maybe not as engaging it as much. And I never thought I'd find it as fascinating as I did. Like, just trying to understand that actually, hold on, there's this segment over here that I never ever thought would read some stuff that are coming from all across the world, and actually the people who I thought were really viewing what I write are actually not engaging as much. And it's an interesting battle, isn't it? Try to understand, who is the audience, because that's the roots of it. I think a lot of people see, and I agree with you, because I've done the same. I think a lot of people see the side of, hey, I'm writing blogs, I'm doing YouTubing, I'm doing all this stuff. But it's actually about what is the audience and who are you engaging with ultimately and fundamentally. And that's the real hard bit to crack, I think.
Yeah, and I think people see, I'm going to say for a lack of a better word, the glamorous side of developer relations and cloud advocacy. They see me, creating videos and blog posts, and they're like, oh, that's cool, I want to do that. But they don't see the days where I am probably like everybody, but I'm stuck in meetings talking about strategies. I'm talking about the minutiae of the detail, and I have nowhere near been like touching Azure. The last couple of weeks I have been building lots of PowerPoint decks, not ashamed to admit that, because of conferences that are upcoming and conferences I've committed to speak at, which I need to build those decks for. But I've not touched the Azure portal. I haven't touched it, Chris. Not from a want of trying, and not from a want of, trying to experience myself, but I've had to build all these decks, had to refine these, because that's part of the job as well. Having an engaging story, having engaging content to show. So yeah, there's weeks where I don't touch technology. Or even though I am a technical person, I don't touch the technology. And that sometimes is hard. That's sometimes hard to get your head around, because I'm used to that. I'm used to playing with the technology. I'm used to tinkering. I'm used to having to fix all of that. And weeks, days, blend into PowerPoint. I can do fancy things with PowerPoint that I couldn't have done 2 years ago. I now know how to make animations, and I'm like, oh, that can come in from the left and it can come in from the right. And that's great. That's a useful skill. But that's sometimes hard as well.
Gotcha.
But yeah, this is a bit like therapy, Chris.
Oh, it's awesome. Hey, I've actually been told by quite a few people who listen to my podcasts and my videos, they're like, it's what's the term? But either way, the therapy kind of voice, like, it sounds like therapy when you're talking. I'm like, well, that's not intended. I don't want to send people to sleep with my podcast. So there we go. But there's something really interesting that you said in there as well about effectively, you need to be in it for the right reasons. I think we said about this with blogging before when we did the live stream on blogging. Do it for your own reasons. Do it because it makes you happy. And I think this is, excuse me, I think this is really important with something like, a cloud advocate or DevRel role, is making sure you know why you're going for it. It's not just for the glamorous sides, it's not just for the presenting, etc. But if you are a technical person who cares about being on a keyboard all day, every day, building something, is that necessarily the path you want to go down? And I think sometimes we can get sucked in by the whole, oh, look, YouTube, shiny, people presenting, this looks really cool, especially in this world of COVID where it's booming with people doing that. I think often we need to almost take that step back and go, why am I interested in that? What is that undercurrent almost, and why do I feel I want to go down that path?
Yeah, and I think, there'll be people sitting there that are maybe a cloud advocate and they're like, well, I spend all day on my keyboard, I build stuff, that's my job. And that's fine. Everybody defines, I think when you look at developer relations and cloud advocacy or developer advocacy, depending on where you are, every company will do it differently, and probably every person will do it differently. I go down the route of trying to do everything, rightly or wrongly. So I try to do a bit of presenting, I try to do a bit of blogging, try to do videos, I try to do the technical thing and stay hands-on keyboard where I can. Other people will maybe focus on one area and that's all they'll do with the cloud advocacy, and they'll not do anything else. And it gives you that flexibility, at least here where I am, and my boss, I hope he's not watching, he's on holiday, but it gives me the freedom to do what I enjoy and do the bits that I enjoy, not do the bits I don't want to do necessarily. So I think you do have to come into it very open. And I think as an IT pro, it's actually quite hard to be in this segment of the industry because the terminology that people use is DevRel, developer relations. And a lot of people think that developer relations talk to developers. I don't talk to developers. I couldn't, Chris. I couldn't talk to you on the same level. I could fake it for a wee while, but you'd probably find the holes in my stories. So I think it's even harder, I think, for me as an IT pro, and I focus on that audience, and everybody thinks I actually talk to developers, and people think that developer relations should only talk to developers. I struggle with that mentality and that kind of ethos that's in the environment as well. And I think I've seen some people say, I want to be in developer relations because I'm a developer. And I'm like, what now? Like, that's not a national career progression. It's not, oh, I come out of college, I become a developer, I become a developer relations person, and then I go and be a CTO. Like, you're like, when did that become the career?
Yeah, that'd be an interesting trajectory, wouldn't it?
But, I think see people think that, well, I'm a developer, so it's developer relations, it's in the job title, I'll just go and do that. And it's like, well,
it's a misconception.
No, and there's other parts to developer relations. Like, we could go down the rabbit hole of telling you that developer relations isn't just cloud advocacy, it's also event planning, it's also in community engagement. There's other people inside DevRel here at Microsoft, but yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about me trying to push back into that developer relations community that's happening and trying to change the misconceptions. I would love to get people to change the title of the industry that I work in and moving it away from developer relations and maybe IT relations, but I don't think I'll live that long to be able to change that, Chris.
There are some battles that you can take on. There are some you should leave, right? Yep. I think that's the point. But I'm glad we broached that subject because I agree. I think that term DevRel, knowing the type of work that you focus on, right, is very much I don't know what the word is, but it's just a kind of clash of terms, really, isn't it? And I think cloud advocate is a nicer term for obviously what you do, right? And DevRel, it doesn't quite explain it nicer. It gives a misconception. So no, that's good. And again, there was something interesting in there that you said that I guess a bit of a theme as we've been talking here a little bit is about. I can see similar in myself that you like to go and do everything. You like to go and have a shot at all these different things. So how do you kind of manage that? Not just from the urge of shiny things, I need to go try everything, not just from a technical perspective, right? But just from and let's broach a subject, from almost a mental health, keeping yourself sane kind of subject, because it's so easy, and I find this myself with making content, that it's so easy to go, you know what, I'm going to record a few sessions this week, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And again, I think what people see is the shiny finished product side of things that oh, look, it's a 30-minute video. But what you don't know is
Yeah.
that 30-minute video actually took me 3 hours because it took all this time of planning, it took the time to record, it took the post-production, uploading it to the website, sorting all that out, all these kind of things. How do you manage that aspect of making sure you've got the right balance for you as a human, for you as Sarah?
Sometimes I do it very well, Chris, and I'm very structured and I'm very, mindful of being balanced and making sure I log off at 5 p.m. or whatever it may be.
Mm.
Other times I don't. I get caught up in the fun, I'll just do this for an extra 20 minutes and, I'll do that. And then before I know it, it's 9 p.m. I've not had any dinner and it's just a mess. It is hard. I think you need to go into it with a plan almost, and a structured day. We've talked about this before about grouping content creation. I think we talked about this when we were on that blogging stream as well.
Mm.
Monday might be the day that I sit down and actually learn something. Tuesday will be the day that I create the blog on it. Wednesday will be the day that I have meetings. Thursday will be the day that I maybe do some social media, check up on everything, answer some, DMs that people have come in and stuff like that. And then Friday's, I don't know, live stream day or whatever it may be. And you have to kind of do that and have that structure and try and put it all together. Otherwise, you end up being someone who is in the morning you check Twitter, in the afternoon, then you go off and build a bit of a PowerPoint presentation. You're like, oh no, I need to answer that email. You answer that email, and then you go, oh no, I need to record that video. You record that video, and then you're like, oh no, I actually need to finish that PowerPoint presentation. You go back to it, and before you know it, you're not productive. You're stressing yourself out, and you are working till nine
Yep.
o'clock. So I think you do need to be a bit like focused, write a to-do list, group your content, think about it, think about what your end goal is. And I think I spoke about this when I was actually, I can't remember who I was talking to this. I think it was the video creation live stream. I was talking about it, but do you gravitate to something shiny? So for example, the team announced that Azure Arc announcement about bringing PaaS services down to on-prem, and that sounded really cool. But I held back from actually going to go and even log on to figure out how to do that, Chris, because I was like, I'll get tempted to then try and create content on
Mm.
it, and I'll have spent 10 minutes learning it, and then I'll put out a mediocre video or a mediocre blog about it and actually not know what I'm talking about and do myself no favours and do the audience no favours. So it's on my to-do list to go and have a look at when I actually have time to sit down and spend a couple of hours learning it and then create content. And hopefully that content will be awesome. Now, I'll have missed the initial rush of, the shiny. Everybody's on, Google, everybody's on YouTube, everybody's on Twitter trying to find something about it. And I'll have missed that initial rush. I wholeheartedly put my hands up there. But my strategy and my plan is if I hold off and do proper quality content, hopefully then it will still resonate with the audience and they'll appreciate the time and effort I've taken into it. Probably sounded quite big-headed saying all of that, but that's kind of the mentality I'm trying to get into, Chris, rather than do this. Right, I've got a spare 5 minutes. Let's talk about the shiny thing that was just announced and put out something. I have done it in the past.
And I think that's important though, right? Just to jump in, like there's something that I talked about with one of my old colleagues, really good friend, on mental health, and it's this idea of almost setting expectations. And for anyone in customer roles, we're always used to, you need to set expectations with customer. They need to be expecting the right thing so you don't disappoint. But actually, it's really important to set expectations with yourself as well and say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do this content this day and this content this day and do this. And this is my plan and this is my rhythm. And if other stuff comes out along the way, great. If I'm able to get more out, great. If I don't get as much out, so be it. Ultimately, I am a person first need to look after myself and need to make sure that I'm doing the right things for me. And that's okay. And that's important. And I think something interesting that you said in there actually was about the almost having that plan, having that kind of cycle of what you're working on. I think a lot of people focus on it typically, and I certainly do at least, knowing that, hey, people expect on a Monday I'm going to have a blog post out. On a Wednesday I'm going to have a blog post out. On a Friday I've got a new episode out, for example. But actually it's just, as you say, just as much about the expectation setting for yourself. Hey, I'm going to go ahead and do this on this day and prep for that later on. So it doesn't need to be that mad rush. It can be that planned cycle. So I think that's a really good piece of feedback and advice there for anyone listening in and thinking about not even DevRel, just their content creation journey, right? I think that's an important one. Yeah.
And I think from the other side of that, as someone who consumes content, because I watch other content, like if anybody's followed me on Twitter and stuff, they'll know that I'm a big farming geek. I grew up on a farm, so I love all that kind of stuff. And there's a number of YouTubers that I love to watch. And I consume their content. They spend a lot of time and money and effort filming those videos on top of their day job, because they're farmers, they're not YouTube creators. Watching that, and I am mindful of giving back to that, because I like their videos. I maybe comment on the videos, which helps all the YouTube algorithms, which is a whole other conversation. And I also subscribe to their content. I will retweet that content. I've even bought their merchandise sometimes, Chris, because they're doing that not as their job. That's a side thing, and it could be helping them with projects on the farm or helping them maintain a living, so I think as audience members, we always have to, when we watch content, try and think about that person that's creating the content. Like, I'm very privileged. I do content creation for my job, and I'm never asking the audience for anything back. I'm just happy if people like my video occasionally. But you need to think about it, like, if you're consuming content, think about the person that's went through all of that. And I think we're probably going off way topic here, Chris, but I think we just need to be mindful of that as well. And it doesn't cost you anything to hit that like button, to retweet something that someone has shared and spent time and energy, and give it a thumbs up. It doesn't take anything for you to do that. So I think we need to be mindful as well that there are certain people that get paid to create content. I'm one of those people. Hands up, say that. So you don't have to necessarily give me anything back. But other people do create that content in their spare time. They spend a lot of money on, video equipment, fancy microphones, lighting, what have it. So that little bit that you can give back and support them is always appreciated, no matter what.
Absolutely. No, and it's not off topic. I think it's a great point because I think there's also the flip side, right? There are, let's face it, there are people on the internet who are trolls, who are out there to get a reaction. And I think sometimes we can all get a bit caught up in things. And sometimes you think, this content could have been a lot better. I've had comments on my own channel where people have said things like, this is supposed to be a beginner's guide. You didn't introduce this or do this. And I'm like, okay, let's try and be constructive about what we're saying here, because like you say, this is something I do in my spare time. Take the feedback and I'll make sure I do better next time. But let's also think about the people from that side, that actually they are all human, and you can go and help people out because they're just trying to help you out at the same time.
Yep, and I'm not open to people, like, I am open to people saying, I wish you'd done this. I think sometimes on like the news videos that I've done, people have said maybe you could have shown the technology rather than just talked about it. Absolutely, totally take that on board. That is constructive feedback, because that's the kind of content you're looking for. If you just come on and say, this is garbage, Sarah, I hate you, you're rubbish, you're a Scottish person, you shouldn't be on YouTube, which is what I've had, that doesn't help anybody. It's just being nasty for the sake of it, and that's not helpful, and it's not how we should be as a society either. No. But yeah.
I'm sorry that you have to go through things like that. There are unfortunately things like this that go on, right? And I think this is also an important topic maybe for us to start as we wrap up, that there is that less glamorous side, and I think we've hinted at this a few times. Everyone always thinks of the glamorous, shiny, hey, I'm a YouTube presenter, I go and do this, this, and this, but not seeing maybe some of those DMs that come in, or, we all read our comments and see what we get in, for example.
Yep.
Other people maybe don't see the types of things that come in, and there is that reality that once you not put yourself on a pedestal, but put yourself out there, you, for want of a better word, attract some of that because of the fact you are there, not because of you're doing anything particularly wrong. And it's maybe just on balance of everything we've spoken about so far, important just to call out.
Yeah, I've unfortunately had colleagues at Microsoft be stalked by people and things like that because they're a visible face towards Microsoft, and it makes them, a bit reticent about sharing things. It makes them, like, I used to have my Twitter DMs open for anybody to come and reach out, ask questions, reach out to me if they wanted me to speak at a conference, whatever it may be, Chris, people could just reach out to me. I was open to that. And then I had a few negative people go in there and just abuse me. And I was waking up in the morning and seeing that. And I'm like, I don't get paid enough to do this. I don't, this is not right. So I've shut my DMs on Twitter. And I know a few people have done that at Microsoft as well because of the sheer volume of trolls that they get. That just puts you off to a certain degree. And I don't enjoy that. So that's often something that's always in the back of my mind. And I think when one of the very first conversations you and I had, you were asking me about the role, and I gave you all the things that I loved about the role, but I also was saying, if you're going to do this, you're going to put yourself out there, and you're going to have to deal with the fact that some people are jealous and nasty, and that's unfortunately something that you're going to have to deal with and be prepared to deal with. So yeah, there's that element if you start to go into that social media thing that you attract the wrong people.
Absolutely.
And have to deal with it.
Absolutely. And for anyone who's listening in thinking, oh man, we're ending this on a downer, please don't think that. I think the point we're trying to really get across is the real world view, right? We want to make sure that we're painting the real picture and not amplifying that, hey, look at all the shiny things that Chris and Sarah and the like get to go and do. There is this aspect of it as well. There are these things that you need to go and consider. So it's not just about, hey, here's some content, but think about all those other aspects that we've mentioned here as well.
Yep, absolutely. I take two people to go into it thinking it's all shiny and rosy and stuff like that, and it is, and it's a privileged job, and I fully admit to having that privilege. But there's also an element you have to think about, and you have to think about whether that's something you want to introduce to your life, your family's life, all that kind of stuff that goes on with it. But cloud advocacy is amazing, though. I enjoy it. It's definitely been a fun ride for the last 18 months.
Excellent. So then, as we're starting to wrap up here, then let's bring it on to some cheerful topics and thinking and reflecting here. Last 18 months, you've been in the role. You were in the same role I'm in right now before that. What are some of the things that you've picked up over the last 18 months, or that as you were kind of, I guess you weren't, as you mentioned earlier, you weren't really preparing to go for the role, but you feel kind of set you up for the role? What are maybe the top 3 things, for example, that you think these are going to be my tips for anyone listening in, maybe to think about?
Figure out the whole blogging and public speaking thing. Give it a try. You might be like, I'm not going to blog because someone else has blogged on the stuff I talk about, so I'm not going to do that. Give it a try, because writing is something that cloud advocacy does, whether it be an informal blog or whether it be the official documentation you're contributing to. You have to have that ability to share your knowledge in a written format, also in a presentation format. So you will have to, at certain times, stand up in the stage and talk to people, whether that be 3 people or whether that be 3,000 people. You'll have to kind of do that at some point. It is a part of the role. I've yet to see a developer advocate or a cloud advocate that doesn't public speak. Try that, because that's a skill that takes a lot of practice. I've definitely not honed that skill yet. I'm getting better at it, but I'm certainly on that journey. So try those things, find out if you enjoy them, find out, because you can get a lot of energy back, like we said at the very start. You get a lot of energy back from doing these things, and speak to people. I think one thing I've seen a lot of people say is they're interested in a cloud advocate role, but they don't know much about it. So reach out to someone. I know I've just said my Twitter DMs are shut, but tweet me. You can ping me on a YouTube video or my blog, and I'll answer you back. I'm happy to share my experience, and I'm sure a lot of other cloud advocates will be more than happy to talk you through what exactly a cloud advocate is from their point of view and what developer relations is. So don't be frightened to try some things, or reach out to people and ask them for their opinion and ask them for their time, because if you're genuinely interested, I will be more than happy to sit down with you and share more experiences than I already have tonight.
Excellent. And what I'm going to do, just multitasking here in the background, is I'm going to bring up there we go. Your YouTube channel. So for anyone who's been listening in and does want to follow and subscribe, here's Sarah's YouTube channel, Techie Lass. Also blog techielas.com with many excellent blogs on there. I saw you post about static web apps earlier, another topic I'm hugely passionate about, so I'll definitely be checking that one out. And your Twitter account feed however we call it,
Yeah.
I guess. My mind blanked temporarily. I was like, your Twitter. There we go, done. Your Twitter, done. So again, if you're interested, folks, and Sarah's obviously dropped the invite there, go ahead and reach out. But I think, to wrap us up, there are a couple of things in there that were really interesting and exciting, and I think I could keep on talking about this, but I have to wrap us up at some point. The content that you create, right, whether it's blogging, YouTubing, podcasting, whatever it is, I think ultimately what we're saying, a bit like we did on the blogging live stream we did a while ago, is just go do it, try something. It might not work, and that is absolutely okay, but you learn from that. There are times, for example, where I've actually combined content. So if I'm going to make a video on something, I'll blog about it at the same time so I can go and release that content. So you don't always have to think, okay, I'm going to do this thing as a blog, this thing as a video, this thing as something else. You could do that content as all 3 or 4 of those things. So try it out. You don't know until you try, and you might like it.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Sarah, awesome session. Thank you so much for joining, sharing your insights, having a lot of fun along the way. I think this is a normal now of our live streams, isn't it? There's laughing at some point throughout. So no, really appreciate you taking the time, sharing your insights, and giving a really amazing session. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam.
Excellent. So there we go, folks. That was a session all about Azure Arc, a little bit about Azure Stack. We covered more about hybrid clouds in the middle there with Windows Admin Center, and then a whole ton about cloud advocacy, DevRel, and the connotations of the name DevRel, and the balanced view of that kind of role and working in the community there as well. So lots to consider. If you have been thinking about that, please digest it. Please get in touch with Sarah if you want to chat with me as well. My door is always open, though I'm not quite in the DevRel space yet, but I am involved in the community, so maybe there's some insights I can share. Who knows, maybe. But thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. You know what to do. If you've liked this episode, please hit like, please hit subscribe, please hit the notification bell. As we mentioned earlier, it doesn't take much to really make us smile. Drop a comment as well, and we love to see those and get your feedback. So with that, thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, and until the next episode, which is actually coming out tomorrow, so stay tuned. Bye for now.